Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me again for episode 3 of the According to Dave podcast, where we're doing our series on faith. Today we're going to be talking about prayer, so pray for the episode. Thank you. Yeah. Last week we tackled salvation. Listen to it again. And, I got a little derailed there, I'm not going to lie, about hell. I have some pretty negative feelings about it. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope you got something out of it. I'm not apologizing for any of it. I think hell is an awful concept and deserves everything I said and more about it. But I hope you saw some of the goodness, too, in the first half of what I was talking about, the idea of salvation according to Christian tradition. There's some good stuff in there too. And one thing I guess I wanted to hammer home again, I'm not sure how clearly it came through, was worshiping God, choosing to believe in a God and worshiping that God, really to me is about... It's kind of the same thing as saying, what do you think is the ideal? What is the perfect? What is the thing that we're striving to be more like? What's worth trying to mimic? And I think what I like about Jesus and about the God as revealed in the prodigal son story that I talked so much about last week is that is a God that I can get behind. That is an idea of God that I can agree with. That's the kind of, if there is a God, that's what I hope God is like. Someone who cares for others, someone who loves strongly, and that's inspiring to me. And that's what I want to be like. And so that's a God I can hold up. A God who says, anyone who isn't on board with me and what I'm doing goes to this place to burn forever. That's not a God I can get behind. So you can see the dilemma that I continue to be in. Now, I'm starting to think, who knew, that maybe doing 4 or 5 episodes of this podcast is maybe not going to completely straighten out for me what I believe. Who knew? But I am starting to think maybe the purpose of these things, because purpose matters to me whenever I'm doing something. I like to know why I'm doing it. Even if it's not even the real purpose, I like to just pretend I know and have something to hold on to and keeps me going, But the truth is, I'm in the middle. I'm a centrist person in a lot of areas of my life. That's just what I'm like. And so maybe the purpose of these things is not for me to pick a side, but for me to articulate why I'm in the middle on this, and maybe that can help me, and maybe that can help others to hear some of those thoughts and start thinking a bit more clearly about where we are and why we're there. And I remember being a youth leader and going up to a retreat with my students, and it was like a big retreat with a speaker, a famous speaker they'd hired to come in and talk to the youth. It's hundreds of kids there. And I remember this guy had 3 chairs on stage. And one chair, he had like a cross on it, like a drawing of a cross. That was like, it's kind of supposed to be like the 3 different places you could be in your life. So there's cross, meaning you're a Christian, you're in. There was a chair on the other side, which is like I'm out, like I think religion is wrong and I don't want anything to do with it. And then there was a middle chair with a question mark. And that was for like those of you who are still kind of figuring it out. You're not really sure if you're in, you're not really sure if you're out, but you're questioning things, And at the end of his talk, he actually took out a sledgehammer and destroyed the middle chair, the question chair. And the point he was trying to make, I think, was, look, there's no middle. There's no like safe middle ground here. You're either in or you're out. And that's fine. Whatever. It was kind of cool to see somebody smash a chair on stage, to be honest with you. But, for me, I realized in that moment how different I was from the mindset of this speaker, where I had been doing my youth leading, where I was kind of pushing everyone into that central chair. I was actually afraid of the kids, not afraid of, but afraid for kids and people who are really far over into either of those other chairs. So against it that they hate it and think there's nothing good there and we should just, eradicate and make religion illegal. It's the worst. And those people who are so far into Christianity that they have all these crazy ideas about the rest of the world and how things work and aren't really open to see the inconsistencies and hypocrisies of it. I was kind of, pushing everyone into that middle chair. And I guess as I'm doing these podcasts, I realize I'm still doing that. I'm still trying to say, hey, wherever you're coming from, if you're hardlined against the other side, think about this. We live in a time where polarization is happening more and more. People are running farther and farther from the middle and going out to the edges. And I'm someone who that really bothers me. I want to bring everyone back into the tent. And I realize by doing that, it might seem like I'm insulting both sides, and that's not really going to help. But I'm actually trying to show how each side has a point when I'm doing these talks. And I'm saying it because I'm having integrity here. This is not just me, well, what do I think this would say? No, these are all my thoughts. But I am trying to be fair and truthful, but also I think that's what I'm trying to do here. So, yeah. Okay, that's enough preamble. Let's get moving. Prayer is a very fascinating topic to me. I have a lot of experience with prayer, having been, an active Christian for many, many years. And, did all sorts of prayer. I was in prayer groups, do kind of family prayer before meals. I led morning prayer at church sometimes, where I would write out a prayer and bring it to church and go up to the front when it was prayer time and pray over the congregation. Like all sorts of things, all the way to just driving in my car, praying about what was going on. So lots of experience with prayer, but also I've heard a lot of sermons on prayer. I've read books on prayer, heard different thoughts on prayer, and it's exciting for me to talk about, and there's lots to get into here. I talk fast, so we'll probably get through it quick, but anyways, it's a very interesting topic, and it's interesting to me also because a lot of people talk about prayer, even if they're not necessarily religious. I've noticed prayer seems like kind of a safe religious word. Sin, not as safe. If you're not in a Christian circle, people don't really want to hear you say sin, but if you say pray, I'll pray for you. Hey, could you guys pray for me? I'm doing, like, it's kind of like it just seems like I'm just being helpful. You're just being helpful, and so it's a term that I think most people hear, even if they're not in a church, small Christian circle. It's a term that kind of culture uses more. But today I wanted to get into, as usual, what I really like about this concept, what I experienced and I thought was positive about it. And then I also want to get into what I think is silly about it, and even some really tough moments I've had with it that I wanted to share with you guys. So let's get into it. I'm going to start with, as usual, the positive, because I'm a positive guy. I like to start with the positive. I would say the number one thing that, looking back at my prayer life, if you'd call it that, is the thing that I appreciate the most about it, and the thing that I miss the most about it, because I don't really pray much anymore, is how intentionally others-focused prayer can be. And what I mean when I say that is, as I live my life, and I'm sure as you live your life, there's enough going on in our worlds that we tend to get caught up in ourselves. We think about our problems. We think about our triumphs. We think about what we have to do, what mistakes we've made. It's for a lot of us, it's all about us. And other people can sometimes we can look at them as just, what can they do for me? Are they making my experience, the movie where I'm the star here, better? Or are they making it worse? And we judge them accordingly. That guy that cut me off on the highway, he's making my life worse. He's a villain. So I get to call him all these names. That person who they were ahead of me in the Tim Hortons drive-through and they paid for my coffee, they made my life better. So they are a hero and a saint, and I love them forever. That's how we kind of think. And prayer, for me, over the years, it really was about praying for other people and seeing them as human beings in their full humanity, strengths and weaknesses, and wishing and hoping well for them, and realizing, every day, taking time out, 20 minutes, half an hour, to just think about other people in our lives, and remembering that they have struggles too, that they're living their own movie where they're the stars, and to consider what they're going through and what their obstacles are and what their challenges are and what their triumphs and joys might be today. That's great to do once or twice. What I noticed was, if you could develop that into a habit where, regularly you were considering others in that way, literally stop it. I mean, how selfless is that, really, when you think about it? This is probably why I was so bad at it, because I'm such a selfish person. But to take time, the most precious thing we got, take time out of your day and just focus on other people for a while. Hey, I wonder how's that person doing? God, help them with this. Help them find this. Help them have patience with this. Whatever. You're considering the humanity of others and hoping for them for a period of time. It's amazing. But like I said, if you can turn that into a habit, which I've seen people do, that can actually, over time, have an effect on the person's being. You don't just pretend for half an hour every once in a while to be a selfless person. You actually start to walk around the rest of your day being mindful. You're almost looking for things to pray for, and you're considering the humanity of others as you walk around and interact with people. Hey, right, that guy who cut me off, I wonder if he's late for a meeting, and he's trying to get there, and or maybe they're dealing, whatever. And, you can make up all stories in your head to excuse bad behavior. Don't ever cut me off on the highway. But I'm just saying, it can build a capacity in someone to be more mindful and aware of the humanity of others and the story that others are going through. And it can build in patience, and it kind of creates this sense of general hope and well-wishing for others that can make day-to-day interactions better and more positive. So to me, from my personal perspective, that was the best thing about praying regularly. Was it made me think about other people when my tendency is just to think about myself. And occasionally it even spilled over into me being a better person. Another thing that was good about prayer is, again, you've noticed that there's a theme with people cutting me off on the highway. But sometimes in life, when little things happen, they feel like big things because our perspective is so small. And sometimes stepping back and praying about something, God, pray for this person who just cut me off. I really want to find this guy. Pray for this guy who just cut me off. You kind of remember, especially if you're praying about other things too. Also on my prayer list is praying for my friend's mother who got diagnosed with cancer, right? And when I line up, God, I can't believe, laundry detergent was up 50 cents today. When I'm going to pray for that right after I'm praying for my buddy's mother who just got diagnosed with cancer, it starts to right size the little things. right? You get this kind of sense of perspective of, oh, maybe that's not a big thing. You know what? I'm not even going to bring that one up. So prayer can bring about perspective, which can be very helpful. For me personally as well, prayer was a way to organize my thoughts and my ideas. I don't know if you've noticed this about me, but I tend to process as I talk, right? Which is why these podcasts maybe are a bit of a mess. I don't even know. But I tend to start talking and then I sort of see what happens. And prayer for me, I often would start praying for a situation where I just had an emotion. You know, I just hear about my friend's mom who had cancer, and I had no idea what to say. I didn't have a formulated thought yet. You know, I hadn't typed out an essay, and now I'm going to read it to God as my prayer. I would just start praying in the pain of it, and I found as I prayed, my thoughts and my ideas would get organized as I got it out, and that would be just about small things too, not necessarily about big, important, difficult things, but, just, praying about what I'm going to do that day or whatever. And it was a way, again, time out and a way to organize and think through more coherently, what I was going to do and what was happening, what was going on. And I would often, when I finished praying, I would feel better than I did before I started, and I would have a better sense of what I'm supposed to do next. Now, that doesn't mean God exists and God was saying those things to me. All the things I've said so far, they could be helpful whether God exists or not. I'm just taking time and doing that and speaking out these things was good for me. Right. Another thing that I liked about prayer was, and there's kind of a negative side of this, which we'll get into in the next part, but to me, there are so many things we hear about, so many issues, so many problems out there that are bigger than us, that we hear about it and we care about them because, hopefully we have some humanity left. We care when we hear bad news about other people. But we can't do anything about it most of the time. And I think today it's worse than it was 20, 30 years ago because we have way more information now, right? That we know about every disaster in the whole world all the time. We know so much more crap. I know about, this senator in the southern states that said this, and I'm just outside Toronto here. It has nothing to do with me, but I feel something about that. Do you know what I mean? Like we know too much. And there's too much crap we're aware of that we have no control over. And prayer for me was a great way to feel like I was doing something about that stuff, but then just having closure on it and letting it go. So it became, in some ways, like a mechanism where I would hear, oh, this disaster happened in this other country halfway around the world. I know nothing about the political climate of that country. I know nothing about any of the reasons why that happened there or whatever it was. I don't know what are the mechanisms to make it better. But what I can do is pray for it. That just from a selfish standpoint, that can make me just feel better and have okay, I did my part. And I can leave it, and I'm not going to carry this around all day or 100 of these things, and not have this sense of there's no response I can make. I'm just going to carry this weight with me that these horrible things are happening everywhere. Prayer was a way to kind of feel like I did something about it, and then also just okay, and now I got to let that go. That's not on my plate today to handle whatever happened with this, senator and this, who cares? It's nothing to do with me. So that I also found that to be helpful. Another thing, I have to be honest, looking back at my time in church and being a youth leader, I had some, prayer is a very vulnerable thing, I think, if you do it right. And some people, it wasn't a vulnerable thing because they would just say the same thing every time or have kind of a practiced, rehearsed speech almost they would give, where prayer for me was very like, I'm just talking right from my heart. It was very blunt, open, honest from me. And I tended to get along well with other people who prayed like that. But if you praying on your own is one thing. If you pray with, 3 or 4 people together, I can remember praying with youth, praying with other leaders, and it bonding you together. You share this time of you're all focusing at the same time on something and trying to help and make it right and figure it out and lift up your honest emotions. And it's really intense. It can be. And I felt like prayer bonded me with some of my friends and some of those youth in ways that I'm not sure we could have had another way. So prayer helped me be intentionally others focused. It gave me perspective on little things versus big things. It helped me organize my thoughts and ideas. It helped give me closure on things that I was carrying around but really had no way to fix. And it helped me bond with others. All right. Couple issues we're going to get into. One of the main ones I wanted to bring up today is there's this, I'll call it kind of a prayer cycle that I felt like I got on sometimes, and I feel like other Christians go through this too, where, and here's kind of how it works. I think it's basically, the Bible is big and has lots to say about a lot of different things, and not everything it says necessarily to me is congruent with other things it says. So it'll talk about prayer, but depending on kind of what verse or area of the Bible you're reading, it seems like prayer is about something else. And that doesn't help. That kind of contributes to this cycle, and I'll explain it here. Essentially, it's very chicken and egg. We'll start with on this end. I would hear a sermon or read a Bible passage about, and I hadn't been praying, let's say, and the passage would say, look, you don't have because you don't ask. Right? That there's, you have to knock for the door to open. You have to seek to find, right? You have to ask to receive. And so, hey, Christian, you're not praying enough. You're not asking enough. You need to start doing that, right? So I go, okay, you're right. I've kind of been let it slide. I need to ask more. So then you would start praying and you start asking. And, you might ask for this or that. Most of the stuff we ask for is probably ridiculous. God, help me get a big screen TV. Some of the stuff would be real and serious and legit, in my opinion. Whatever, but you'd start asking. And then typically you don't get whatever it is you ask for, because that's what happens most of the time. And when you're asking and not getting, usually you then, read a different passage or hear another person giving a sermon on prayer, and they would talk about, well, you're not asking for the right things, right? So the reason why you're not getting is because you're probably asking for things that God doesn't want. God doesn't want you. He not interested in giving you a bigger screen TV. That's not the kind of stuff God is interested in. So stop just asking and hoping, you hit a winner. Prayer, that's not what prayer is. Prayer is about, you got to figure out what God wants. Right? So you go, oh, okay. So my prayers are no longer about God, I'd like this. God, I'd like that. God, please make this happen. Now my prayers are, God, whatever you want to happen, let that happen. God, whatever you think, if you think this person should be healed, then heal them. If you don't, that's cool too, right? Your prayers start turning into that. And then you start, over time thinking, well, why am I even praying that? Because, I mean, God knows whether to heal that person or not, right? This all-knowing, all-powerful God. They know whether to do it. They'll do it or not. God's not waiting for me to pray the whatever you think should happen prayer to do. God's gonna do what God's gonna do. So it kind of leads to this sense of my prayers don't make any impact. So who really cares? So you stop praying. And then 6 months later, the cycle starts again. Hey, you're not praying. You don't have because you don't ask. And you go, oh yeah. And you get right back on this cycle. And so I think Christian theology on prayer has this weird cyclical nature to it built into it, which is a problem. But it's also, it seems sometimes to me like a bit of a shell game where what you're trying to hide is that prayer doesn't really work. And doesn't make sense. And so you need to kind of, there always needs to be a dangling carrot in front of us in order to keep people from just being, hey, someone just saying, hey, wait a second, you know? So the cycle is an issue. Another thing is, and I kind of touched on this in the first one about this closure idea, this kind of pray and leave it. Sometimes prayer can replace action, I'll pray for a situation so that I don't actually have to deal with it. And these are not situations where I can't have an effect on it. These are situations where I can have an effect on it, but I choose to just pray instead. It's much easier to just pray about it than it is actually to do anything. And to be fair, the Bible does address this. Like Jesus says, hey man, if you're praying for the hungry and then you just, you go to church and you pray for the hungry and then you walk by hungry people and don't feed them, like, you're an idiot, I'm paraphrasing there. But this idea, like the Bible, to be fair, does address that. You shouldn't do that. But I think in reality, that can be a truth about prayer, that you can just resort to it as a default and not actually do the work required. Yeah, but to get back to that first point, there's an issue here. There's a fundamental issue that I ran into with prayer over and over and over again as a Christian that I can't get past. And that is, in terms of as an asking and then God doing thing, it just does not work. And this is an insurmountable mountain for me. I mean, I think George Carlin has a bit on this where he talks about, look, 50% of what people pray for happens and 50% of it doesn't. Look, some people do get cured from cancer, and sometimes, whatever the prayer was does happen. Did God do that and not the other? And the fact that it doesn't work doesn't matter a lot of the time, or didn't matter a lot of the time to me, because the stuff I was praying for was often stupid. And it didn't matter if it happened or not. But sometimes prayer really mattered. And this is an example. This is a tough subject for me to talk about. This was a really difficult time for me. But I remember when I was a youth leader, one of the youth coming to me and another leader and saying that they had been raped. And, I think it was maybe a couple months after we had done a series on prayer and done the, you don't have because you don't ask. It was that part of the cycle, I guess. And this girl was sort of like, she was crying. I was crying. This was a very difficult situation, obviously. Very emotional. And she was kind of like, I prayed that God would make it stop. And he didn't. Like, why didn't he? That was tough. And that's a question I still I struggle with that. And, I know, the existence of evil, it's such a tired criticism of religion for many religious folks. Oh, well, evil exists. There's all these sort of philosophical arguments about it. But I find a lot of that stuff is not helpful when you're talking about a specific situation. This was a real event where this girl went through this horrible thing. And look, this happens all over the world often. This is not the only time in history, obviously. But this girl went through that, prayed about it, and God did not stop it. And so, as a youth leader, as a Christian, what was my response to her supposed to be? Now, the only one, or one of the main ones, I think, that most people in my position would have said it's maybe it's the best ammo, a believer has in those situations, is the kind of mysterious ways argument, right? God works in mysterious ways, right? Because, if God knows what's happening, knows what's going to happen, and has the power to change it, it's really hard to understand that anything happens outside of his will. So if you don't want to go down the road of, well, he didn't intervene because he couldn't, because he's not actually all powerful, or he didn't do it because he didn't know, if you don't want to compromise those things that you believe about God to be true, then you have to, in those situations, say to someone, it happened because he willed it to happen. And then you've got to come up with some pretty creative acrobatics to have that make sense. I've heard different things like, well, God wanted you to go through that hard time so that you could be a light to other people who went through it, and you could share about it and it would help others. I mean, no. No. That's dumb. That can be a good thing that comes out of a bad thing, but that can't be the purpose for the bad thing. Just don't have any of the bad things happen. None of them. Don't have any more rapes. If someone is about to rape someone, God, flick that person into the ocean. That's all that has to happen. Just do that. Every time it's about to happen, flick them. See ya. Or her. So you have to either go with the mysterious ways, right? His ways are mysterious. I think there's a Australian stand-up comic who does a bit on that, which is very crude but also quite funny. I forget his name. Or you have to kind of go with a sort of a suspended, like, God, he does have power, but he's sort of willfully opting out of interfering. Right? And so this is kind of if you've seen the movie Constantine with Keanu Reeves, God and the devil had a bet about which way would man go, good or bad, but they can't intervene. They can't interfere, right? They're staying in heaven and hell and letting us, giving us a chance to choose, right? So you can kind of weasel your way maybe down that road. C.S. Lewis, who I brought up last week as well, wrote Mere Christianity and a bunch of other books. He talks about how God cannot sort of more fully reveal himself to people because if he did so, it would be too powerful for us, that it would override our ability to choose to believe in him. In other words, he would be so real to us and so clear to us that we would just be on board with him. And he doesn't want that, so he has to keep kind of a low profile, keeps on the DL, so that we could still we have the opportunity and ability to choose to believe or not. He'll override faith. He'll make belief obsolete if he too fully reveals himself. And maybe you could say, well, in that situation, if he flicked that dude into the ocean, he would have revealed himself too strongly to you, and then you would have believed in him but not really chosen to. And this is a better test of your faith. Come on. Come on. So the other option, what I actually said in that situation was, I don't know. I don't know why God didn't intervene. I'm so sorry that happened. What can we do? And I never saw her again. But it made me think about the next time the cycle had a, hey, ask and the door will be open. Ask and you'll receive. It made me think a little bit about, is this something I can say with integrity? The next time I was in a situation where prayer mattered and the health of a loved one was on the line, or I was in a tough situation and I go to pray about it, I think back about that and think, is this going to work? Is there actually any point to this? It's tough. So what? Well, look. If you pray, if you are a person who prays, good. I want you to think about, though, what prayer kind of actually, what is the result of you praying? What does it do for you and your relationship with other people? Are your prayers kind of like, I think as Donald Miller said in his really good book, Blue Like Jazz. If you haven't read it, check it out. It's really interesting. Are your prayers just like putting coins in a slot machine? You're just hoping to hit a winner. Is that what prayer is for you? Or are your prayers kind of lifting you and other people up? Do they cause you to act differently, to behave better, to see clearer? If you don't pray, how are you finding ways to be intentionally others focused? How are you finding ways to right size little things from big things in life? How do you organize your thoughts and your ideas about issues? I remember before I was a Christian, I would take a walk at night and I would talk to the moon. That's what I would call it. But that was my time to organize my thoughts and ideas before I kind of had a religious structure around me. It was more raw. Are you talking to the moon? Do you have a way and a time to do that? How do you deal with all the information you hear about issues going on that have nothing to do with you, are nowhere near you? Are you having trouble getting closure on those things, leaving them be, lifting them up and letting them go? When do you bond with other people? When do you feel like you're really vulnerable and they are too? And rather than take advantage of each other's vulnerability, it actually turns into a time of mutual acceptance and care. And no one regrets the vulnerability later. How are you doing that? I think these are good things that prayer has done for me, and I don't want to let them go. But I'm not sure how to be a person of prayer given the issues that I've outlined with it as well. How do I not get caught in that cycle again? How do I make sure my prayer doesn't replace actually acting? And what do I do when it doesn't work? Thanks for listening, guys. That's probably enough for today. We'll catch you next week. Have a great one. Later.